Hello and welcome to Scripture Untangled, a podcast by the Canadian Bible Society. My name is Joanna Lafleur. I'm a friend of the Canadian Bible Society, and I'm going to be your guide for today's episode. Today, we feature an interview with Michael Perreau, interviewed by journalist Lorna Dueck. Successful global business founder Michael Perreau gave it all up for the Bible because it made a difference in people's lives. After making his fortune and leaving the financial world behind, he and his wife Deborah turned their lives over to giving it all back, 90% of it to helping the poor. And so for 12 years, Michael Perreau was a Director General of the United Bible Society, serving over 240 countries and territories through 154 member societies, including the Canadian Bible Society, whose mission is the Bible for everyone. Michael is a proven leader with a track record in business and social transformation. He's passionate about building good to great organizations that impact for the long term and provide spiritual and social capital. So please enjoy this conversation as we talk to Michael Perreau about the Bible for everyone.
Michael was born in Malaysia. He has fled race riots and moved to the UK with $50 in his pocket, where he studied and became an industrial psychologist, beginning in the petrochemical and electronics industry, and he eventually founded a global business in mergers and acquisitions. He sold that company 15 years ago and with his wife Deborah released 90% of the sale equity into the creation of Transformational Business Network. And over the past 20 years, that charity has been part of creating many thousands of jobs as part of alleviating poverty. There are other parts of Michael's career that we cannot discuss, but we can say that work he did involved peace and conflict resolution, and we will explore what we can there as well. Boy, we've got a lot to learn from 68-year-old Michael Perreau, the Director General of the United Bible Society. So let's get started and welcome Michael. Where are we finding you today?
I'm in deepest Somerset, Lorna, and it's just a thrill to be able to have this conversation with you. Somerset is the backwaters of England. I'm in the hills of what is referred to as the Blackdown Hills.
Do you still have 2 donkeys, chickens, and dogs there in those hills on your farm?
Unfortunately, I do. They teach me a lot every day.
What do you learn from a donkey?
Lorna, it's the only animal that spoke in the Bible. That's for starters. No other animal in the Bible spoke. But donkeys are stalwart characters, and they are thinking animals. And often watching them, it's unfortunately mistaken that they are stubborn, but actually they are doing a lot of thinking. And they are very enduring. The life stories that people pour out by just stroking a donkey when they visit is just quite remarkable, that we would stop in the narrow ways and byways of English countryside and people would stop and stroke the donkeys and tell their life stories. It's a ministry in its own right. But can I say to you, I am the accompanier. It's my wife's animals. She has the menagerie. I'm just the gopher.
Okay, it's the only animal that spoke in the Bible. You caught me on that one. What is your personal practice with the Bible?
Lorna, I don't know about you, but it's a very simple faith that I hold on to, because I don't have big theologies to rest on. And it's rooted in perhaps 3 things, Lorna. The first is that you and I and all of humanity have a very profound need for food. And that food is the things that we consume. And of course, in typical humanity, we consume good as well as bad food, if I may. We have also ways in which we feed our minds. But what is it that we feed our spirits? We are first and foremost spiritual beings that need nurturing, because the soul and the spirit of our lives, if it's left, it will probably degenerate. So I have a very pragmatic approach that I need to feed my soul daily. And what better way to feed my soul than to encounter my time with God through the Bible? That's the simplicity of it in terms of feeding my soul. So it's my operations manual. It's my daily encounter when I'm feeling down or when I'm in a crossroads, or there is literally a book, a season for everything, and there is a book for every season in the Bible. And I find myself always never being far away from entering into an encounter with God. God speaks to us. I don't know about how you see it, but I believe God speaks to us through his word, through others, and through the circumstances we find ourselves in. And what better way than to have that encounter with God as your first daily bread, to feed your soul so that it can regenerate and give purpose and put a sense of a compass into that purpose, and then face the day, whatever the day brings, because the day is not always going to transform into a perfect day, but whatever the day brings, that sense of that Spirit of God you've encountered prevails in you no matter what you face into, the headwinds that you face in life. I have something called my spiritual disciplines, like a long distance runner, and that's one of the 7 areas that I have perhaps encountered. It's a work in progress, a daily encounter, cultivating a discipline of daily encounter with God. So that's kind of where I see my Bible.
So you do it in the morning. Do you follow a plan? Or how do you dig into those many books?
I read the Bible from cover to cover. And when I finish, I start again. And I'm in Jeremiah at the moment. So I'm coming, to a place just having eaten, if one has to use metaphorically, Isaiah, having been through the Psalms, and I'm in Jeremiah in the mid-end of Jeremiah. And that's a book of lamentations in itself, isn't it, Lorna? It's a book of getting plucked out and then being put in. I call it my book of how can I put it? It's a book that really tells you about being planted in places where sometimes you may not want to foresee to go. But when you're planted there, you need to see God's purposes in this. So Jeremiah is really teaching me about new seasons. I have one verse that today was what I was resting on in Jeremiah 6:16. It speaks about being at the crossroads of our lives and standing in it and being still and then walking in that because it was preordained by God so long ago. Every one of those words have such a profound meaning. I'm being asked to stand, not walk. I'm being asked to be still, not run. And I'm being asked to then walk in something that God's already designed. I don't have to fret. I need to discover. And that discovery means I can walk in the peace of the presence of God. But there is a sting in that particular verse. I need to listen. And in a distracting world, listening is a discipline we need to profoundly develop almost regularly. And I would say to you that sometimes I'm distracted. So I begin from beginning of the book and to the end of the book. And then I start again. I don't stop. And I discover new things. The last time I was in Jeremiah, it was something else that I discovered. I think it's the rustling of the trees, the new season. I landed at Tel Aviv airport and it was February, cold February. But the most distinctive thing I found as I was reading that passage the day before was the almond trees were so strong in my nose. It gave me almost a kind of, how when the blossom is so strong, it sort of tickles your nose. It tickled my nose at Tel Aviv airport. The almond trees were so much in blossom. Now, you don't call that a coincidence, do you? God was saying, it's a new season. And I'm reminding you, you just step off the plane. It's your trip to my land and my people. And it's a new season for you. And here am I, giving you this blossom to remind you in all the senses that I made you in. So that was the last time I read Jeremiah, February last year.
And what a life journey you have had. So many seasons in your 68-year-old life.
Yeah.
You fled unrest as a student. When you see the refugee highway flooded with over 80 million refugees looking for a better life, what goes through your mind?
I see me. I see me in the young man. I see me in the young lives looking for a better place. I see me in the story of the circumstances that I didn't want to be. I didn't want to leave my country. The circumstances forced me to leave. I saw some of my community hacked to death. It was a cost that I had to pay. So I do see myself in that. We've had Ukrainian refugees staying with us when all of that broke out, and it's been such a joy to have a grandmother, a mother and her 2 children here with us. We had them for 6 months. They've now moved to, the grandmother has gone back to Ukraine, but the daughter and her 2 children have now got their own accommodation. And they have taught us so much and reminded us about so many things, about the human compassion, that Jesus was a displaced person, a refugee himself, and they are treasures. Amidst all of our hesitancy and humanity's hesitancy, Lorna, they are treasures amongst us people. If we can just see those treasures, of course there's going to be those that take advantage. Of course there's going to be those that fall short. But should that stop us from being who we are called to be? Compassionate people of God, for those treasures that are worthy of being given. I'm not meant to be in the roles that I am in and in the places that I have been, Lorna. How can a kid who couldn't afford a pair of shoes to go to even school have been the Director General of United Bible Societies? How can that be? That should not be. That's impossible, but in God's storyline, that's possible.
When did you first meet God? When did you first meet your Savior?
I think 2 pivotal moments. One is legacy and the other is personal encounter. I think in the legacy, I remember my grandmother was a convert, and when she converted to faith, she was ostracized. And she had a faith which was so deep that she used to prayerfully hope and pray that one day she will hear God and read the Bible in her heart language. The irony of that, Lorna, is that my grandmother was illiterate, yet she had that prayer. And she died never ever hearing God speak to her in her heart language. And my mother had that same prayer, and she was literate, but she died without ever hearing God speak to her in her heart language. I am speaking to you in a business language, which is not my heart language. It's only because of going to university and studying and adopting a language that I am able for us to converse. Otherwise, when I am back in the fishing village that I come from, I would speak that heart language. So I would say I inherited a legacy. That legacy stayed with me. And I embraced that legacy because when I became Director General, incidentally, for purpose of factuality, I've stepped down as of December after 12 years, and I've just handed over. I was meant to hand it over after 10 years, which was my promise to the community, but because of COVID, they've asked me to stay on. So I've just handed it over. So I'm in a period of, I call it restoration and rest, and I'm enjoying it thoroughly, waiting for the next assignment, as I call it. But God reminded me when I took on that role, I would meet Hannah right in the middle of the bushes of Africa, this 80-year-old woman who would walk 5 hours to receive her very first Bible in her heart language. She left at 7 in the morning and arrived at about 12 at midday just for her to receive her first Bible. But that woman epitomized my grandmother. And I met Madame Wong in the Yunnan Mountains, deep in the Yunnan Mountains, and she showed me her tattered Bible. But that very Bible was the cause of her husband being in prison for 17 years. So God reminded me of that calling of the legacy through these old women that I kept meeting. And they are just 2 stories that I share with you today, but they are encounters of profound nature. So I inherited, I wouldn't like to say I came to faith, but I inherited the heartbeat of my mother and grandmother's faith. I came to a personal faith through university and meeting when I left. When I left my country, I had only $50, and the first person that befriended me was a fellow student doing her medical training. I was still learning English then, and she came and befriended me. We were just friends. So she brought me to faith, and she has been my wife since then. We married as students, and we've been married for 45 years. So we were students. She was a girl from a remote rural environment. For me, in a cross culture, that would have been really just unheard of. She's English. And so she's my human spiritual anchor.
And how many years have you been married?
45 years.
Lovely.
Yeah.
Lovely.
Yeah.
I do want to talk about getting the Bible in every language. You explained that in the heart language so well. But you caught me by surprise. We'll get there. You caught me by surprise that you have handed over the Director General role. But here you are, 68. You've not stopped engaging in workplace challenges. You're on several boards. How do you fuel your energy to be waiting for your next assignment, as you said? You're not hanging up your shoes and retiring and patting those donkeys full time.
Well, they're now beginning to recognize me, Lorna. I'm no longer the part-time visitor that comes where they look strangely and say, "Who are you?" So I'm now becoming a bit more familiar with them. We took them to the church, local church here, and they allowed me to kind of take them with me. I think, as my wife says, there isn't a retirement plan in the Bible, is there? It's just a change of address. So my encounter is really about being involved generously in the matters of purpose that God has placed on our hearts. So as long as God places deep purposes that He wants accomplished, then I want to make myself available. That doesn't mean I have to work relentlessly or I have to be in a relentless place. I can be in a place, I akin the season I'm in now as more Jethro than Moses. There's someone else doing the Moses job. I've handed it over. I'm more Jethro. I'm the guy who's done the task. I'm no longer Paul. I'm maybe more Barnabas, if I can put it that way. Recognizing the seasons and recognizing that you're called to purposefulness and meaningfulness in what God has ordained. You just need to make yourself available, because able people who are not available is no good to God. And there are a lot of able people, but who are never available because they're waiting for things to be perfect, for us to be successful, or when we are all sorted out, then we get engaged in the work of God. God wants us to engage with the work of God when we are at sometimes our most weakness, because His strength is shown when we didn't expect it, that His surprise can be profound. So I know I'm not done yet, but where am I going to be needed? I'm quite relaxed about that. I know assignments will come and go. At the moment, I leave for the Philippines tomorrow, and it's a short assignment, but I know that God's going to use that moment. He uses profound moments. The last assignment I did, just as I had stepped down, Lorna, it was one of my grandchildren's birthdays, and I really didn't want to go for that assignment. And my wife, who's deeply rooted, encouraged me to miss the grandson's birthday. And I got on the plane, and you know how it is. You get upgraded. Wow, you're feeling, wow, somebody recognizes it. Thank you, Lord, on that upgrade. And then I get to the transit airport and I get upgraded again. You don't get upgraded twice. That's unheard of. If you're a missionary, that's That's not the kind of play. Fine if you're in business. I sit down and there is this executive who is a CEO of an electronics company, and he's been looking for a friend in which I have the address of this friend, and he's been looking for this friend for the last 20 years. And I have the address of this friend in my pocket. I then realize it's not the upgrade. I had a job, I had to be available. The upgrade was the bonus. I was able to connect this particular CEO with his long lost friend. What would that have been by way of encounter, Lorna?
Well, I think it wouldn't matter how many pages of your life we turned over, we would find that you had been lined up for encounters. Tell us about creating a global firm in mergers and acquisitions. Before you became a missionary, you had very high-end business work. How does that happen to a refugee kid with $50 in his pocket?
There is something about being in the right place and the right time. Does play a part in God's ordinance. There is something also about being willing to be courageous and going places and trying things. I was lucky that the corporate world was kind to me, and therefore scholarships as a minority, and with the context that I came, I had a choice of being an angry young man or an energetic young man, if I can put it that way. And I chose being an energetic young man rather than an angry young man, put that energy in that place. And I think the corporate world embraced that energy and gave me opportunities I would not have had in far-flung places. So that, I think, started to mold me in the corporate world. But I also discovered there was a niche in my time of play, my season. And in my time of season and my play, there were very few mergers and acquisition organizations which were catering for family-led businesses. There were a lot of corporates that were doing corporate mergers and acquisitions, but not if you are a small family-owned business and you want to grow organically and you want to maybe merge with another family-owned business, or maybe you're now larger and you want to sell that business and you want to move on with your family. It's that space. So I call it a boutique space that I started to discover, and there were a lot of family-owned businesses, and it ranged from businesses in Singapore that were owned by Chinese migrants. And so I started to niche into the family-owned businesses which were run by migrants. And as a migrant, I started to then discover that that affinity played into the scope. And the rest became history. God just abundantly blessed.
And as that grew, as those blessings came on your mergers and acquisitions business, you developed another theory that said, God increases our standard of living to increase our standard of giving. Explain where that took you.
The pivotal point, of course, is that by the time we sold the business, we had 128 staff. And so we shared the wealth with all 128 staff. So they also benefited from the sale of the business. And that gave birth to 27 other businesses, because from the equity that some of them had, they went on to set up their own little businesses. I'll give you one little example. My driver set up his gardening maintenance business that employed 25 people today. I'm the minority shareholder, but he wanted me as his mentor. And he went on to set it up, and I encouraged him. That was my driver. That's my driver who today employs 25 other people. It's a small business, but it became a blessing. So even though we had come to the end of our season with 128 people, when I multiply those 27 businesses today, there are sevenfolds in terms of how many people are employed, if you see what I'm saying. So that's one particular kind of blessing of generosity. The other is, I think I have to blame my wife. She said, why do we follow a tithe? If we've been stewards of this business and God has abundantly blessed us, let's do the full blessing all the way. How many properties can we own? How many cars can we drive? Isn't one enough for us? So we took a very disciplined approach. And I don't want to sound as though we benefited significantly from that, and our children benefited significantly from that. But there was abundance. And that abundance came not from abundance, but from a place of adversity. I come to know that abundant living is not the absence of adversity, but it's growth in the midst of it. And that's what I learned in my journey. So when the time came, God has raised my standard of living. I don't look all around me, and that standard of living is so immense compared to what my parents had and what my grandmother had. So, yeah, it was a natural progression. I think I would say not a profound Damascus experience, but a journey.
Pausing the conversation with Michael to tell you about the Bible course, because whether you're a seasoned Bible reader or you're just starting on the journey, the Bible course offers a superb overview of the world's best-selling book. This 8-session course will help you grow in your understanding of the Bible. Using a unique storyline, the Bible course shows you how key events, books, and characters all fit together. It's great for in-person groups, but it can also be used for digital gatherings. It can be really used anywhere. You can watch the first session for free and review the accompanying course guide. Go to biblecourse.ca to learn more. biblecourse.ca, and the link is down in the show notes. Now back to the conversation.
And adversity was part of that journey. You have lessons on how we should handle adversity. To share some of them with us. What would be a key focus when we're hitting adversity?
When we are deep in that, we find ourselves when we are deep in that place where it's just dark or deep. We often need providence in those dark and deep places. And providence comes in many different guises. I call them treasures, gifts from God. But sometimes our preoccupation with being in that deep darkness, and I would describe after leaving home with only $50 and I had to travel through India and Russia to get to Europe. So that in itself was a treacherous journey. There were deep and dark places. You feel like you are never going to get out of this hole. But I hold on to moments of treasures that strangers had lent a hand. People that came your way. It might be innocuous conversations of hope. And I think when we are deep in that place, sometimes the rescue is being sent, but sometimes we don't see the rescue. We don't see it because we are so deep. So one of the things that I hold on to is when I am in places of adversity, whether in corporate world or in personal life, I look not to the adversity, I look to kings of hope, treasures of hope and gifts from God that will say, that's good enough for me to hold on to because I can build on that. I can build on the next step. So it takes a small bit of light to light up a very dark room. Lorna, we don't need to have a fire. We don't have to have a blazing fire in the middle of the room. We don't have to feel the warmth. We just need a matchstick of light. And that's what God often sends. So that's what I embrace. I don't look for adversity, but I don't hide away from that. And perhaps that's what's led me to being in places where fools fear to tread in terms of peace and conflict resolution. So I discovered through that in the places on conflict, blessed are the peacemakers might be one way to look at it, but actually I look at it not from that point of view, because so often in conflict situations, I'm not resolving a conflict. I'm just creating a place of pause for air to be, for 180,000 people to leave a town, for ceasefires to take place that doesn't last. Often it's pause moments, but it's enough for God to be at work in those pause moments. And what I've discovered is it doesn't matter who you are trying to intermediate with. Relationships matter. Relationships matter to God. Relationships matter in conflict situations. And everybody has brokenness. Nobody's immune. We are here on this call, Lorna. You and I carry brokenness with us. We all have brokenness. We all have wounded hearts that need healing and restoring. And we all want to be listened. The power of listening in a conflict situation is so powerful. When someone recognizes that you are authentically listening to them and to their brokenness and their wounded hearts, and you build a relationship of equity, so many things are possible. People who say no to peace, or say no to a ceasefire, or say no to letting a group of people leave, can say maybe, and that maybe becomes a yes. And if that meant for the 7 hours, which was the last assignment, all I got was 7 hours, but it was enough for 180,000 people to leave. That's good enough for me. And it was good enough for God.
That is so beautiful, that slowing down and taking a pause can actually evacuate 180,000 people. And really, it is the clear, peacemaking involves the clear relationship building of listening to opposing sides.
And recognizing we all are wounded people.
My.
Not one person that's wounded. We all are.
Are you still jetting about, getting dropped into hot spots like this?
Just one at the moment.
I'm sure one is enough at the moment. One at a time is enough.
Yeah.
Well, from that, I'm just watching my clock here because I do want to get on to your other great adventure of the last 12 years. And that was to direct the Bible societies that were across 244 countries and including Canada. What spots were on your radar? Was it the suffering church? Was it the secular church, the majority, the minority church, the technology church? I mean, gosh, it's a complicated time for getting the Bible across 244 territories. What was on your radar?
We have a simple mission, but one of the key issues is that when you've got a complex organization with complex confessions and interdenominants and complex cultures, you've got to keep messages simple, isn't it, Lorna? The message has to be so simple that nobody can start to argue about it. So we have a simple mission that everybody embraces, and that is the Bible for everyone. Not that anyone will want the Bible, but we should have a posture in which that anyone who wants it should be able to have it. But the reality, Lorna, is that there are 7,000 languages, of which only 2,000 languages has the Bible. Of which right now all the agencies in the world are working for the next 2,000. But there are still 2,000 that's not even begun. We haven't even started the business of translation. Can you imagine you and I perhaps waiting for generations and generations? It's a little bit like the 400 years when God's people waited for the Messiah, and they probably would have forgotten the wait, the darkness, and then suddenly out of that darkness burst light in the unexpected place. This is what these 2,000 languages and people groups are waiting for. Someone to pour out light, for them to hear God speak to them through their hearts. So I think it's such an impassioned mission to be engaged with, to make the Bible simply available. What people choose to do with it then is in a way in God's hands, but we've got to get the first milestone to get it available.
So what's happening to get more translations done in these remote, and these languages sometimes aren't even documented enough. AI can't help you. Like there's not enough in the algorithm on these languages.
I think I embrace digital because it will accelerate the process of translations, but it cannot replace the human heart and the human engagement. But it does give an acceleration, because an average Bible may take 20 years or so to translate, and sometimes a bit more. An average New Testament takes about 12 years, the Old Testament about 7 years. So it takes around 20 years. But, recently when we translated a Bible in Zambia, it took us 3 years. So there is acceleration. So digital is something to be embraced, not to be sort of scoffed at as diluting, if you like, the quality and integrity of the Bible. But agencies are cooperating much more. People and local indigenous churches are now becoming more involved in the translation rather than professional translators. It's the people with the passion. If my mother was approached and said, "Would you be a translator of the Bible as you are a teacher?" she would have jumped to it, because they would have had the motivation to want to finish the job much more than, let's say, a lifetime missionary who might say, "That's my life's work." They might want to do it. No, we want to wait because we don't want to wait till our children can get it. So I think there's a much more sense of urgency, greater cooperation and collaboration, and advancement in digital. These are coming together. We are living in an age where the possibility of the completion of the task is a very real prospect. Will it happen in my lifetime? I'm kind of maybe not sure about that. But will it happen in my children's lifetime? Absolutely. Absolutely, without doubt. That possibility is a real prospect. But we need hands and hearts to lean in and continue that task that we started 2,000 years ago and is finishing. So I think that galvanizes me in terms of that Bible. But leading a flotilla of ships is not an easy task, Lorna, because you've got the frigate and the aircraft carriers and the little tugboats. They come in different sizes and shapes and different confessions and different cultures. So that takes a little bit of... So I try and simplify the message by saying there are parts of the world where the landscape of the Bible is about accessibility. And there are parts of the world where the landscape of the Bible is about availability. And there are parts of the world where the landscape of the Bible is about credibility. And each one of them requires a different response. If I were to say in Canada, for instance, the landscape of the Bible will be more rooted in credibility. So we have to become confident and competent in the public space about speaking about the Bible, that it has a place in social discourse, that it has a place in nation building, in the way in which our laws have been formed, our hospitals have been created. We have to remind that without the Bible, some of these works that we take for granted would not have ever begun. But there are places where the availability of the Bible is not there. Translation is important. And of course, there are places where it's the dark places where we have to use digital as a solution to accessibility so that people can have the Bible.
Well, let's conclude our conversation in the realm of the Bible for Canada, the Bible for our public spaces in Canada. I'm sorry, Michael, but I think resistance to the Bible has increased in Canada. Church attendance has dropped like a stone. There's not another business that could have stayed in business had it not been supernatural like Christianity. So where does the Bible fit in public life in Canada?
I like to suggest 3 areas that we should explore. I like to suggest that people are spiritual but not religious, that people are seeking meaning in a post-COVID environment, and that we need to make that available in a way that is digestible, that creates meaning to people, that some of those disciplines that they yearn for, they are seeking. And those disciplines might be wrapped in the form of meditation, contemplation, and it's how we make that accessible so that people can increase their spirituality without the religious tag that comes with it. And I think sometimes we trap ourselves by wrapping the Bible in a religious tag rather than a spiritual tag. And I think there'll be greater accessibility to something which is deeply spiritual, which has meaning to human life in the area of having peace, creating well-being, finding meaning in a post-COVID world. There is a greater threshold of people seeking for meaning and spirituality in a post-COVID world. We need to de-religionize if there's such a word, the Bible, and not religionize the Bible. And that means God's people need to not be passive as well as also possessive about the Bible being theirs. I think secondly, we need to also recognize that in any nation that goes through an environment, there will always be the antagonists. But what we want to work is, I call it the movable middle. Who are the movable middle in Canada? It may be the young adults. It may be the young parents. But who are the movable middle that are not antagonistic, but are more inquiring? And we need to be rooted in doing good research that attends to those movable middle, because you can spend a lot of energy with an antagonistic group, but achieve very small dial moves. That's the second issue, I'd say. Who are your movable middle? In most Western contexts, as a generalization, young adults in parental roles are movable middle, somewhere between 28 and 35. They become disenchanted with where they come from. They're needing something more meaningful. They are burdened by heavy financial issues. Careers might be going or not, and therefore the meaning is really seeking now for them to discover. So there's a discovery moment, a rediscovery moment for them. And then I would say we need to have the courage to take it into the public space for debate and engage with that debate, but also be wise not to get engaged in the debate which we come across as judgmental. I'll give you a particular contentious issue, and I'm going to be criticized if someone is listening to this podcast. Society is actually not debating gender. What society is really debating is climate. What we have to get involved with is what society is seeing as the big issue. As an illustration, we have to get involved that God cares about the creation He made. We've got to get involved that we also care as God's people. Because creation is right all around us. Look at the floods and the heat waves of Canada. If that's not a signal, but sometimes the church is quite quiet about those matters to really tell them that we are with you, the young people of the future generation. We are with you about creation. We are with you about care and stewardship. We got to get and work with them. But what do we get? We might get engaged with something which is actually not on their radar at all, like the gender issues. That will come. There will be a place when we can have those debates and discourse. But we've got to win their hearts on the issues that really matter to them. What really matters to them. So I think I'm overgeneralizing that sometimes we wrong foot ourselves on the debate issues in the public discourse space. And we have to become wiser on those public discourse space to win ourselves a hearing. So those would be the three things that I'm not saying any of that, by the way, I'm simply giving you a perspective. It's a vantage point. So forgive me if I'm going to offend quite a few of your listeners, but it's a vantage point. It's a limited perspective. Who's Mike Perreau? He comes into Canada ever so infrequently, and he loves Canadians, by the way. I love Canadians. So they are.
And that is a great note to conclude it on, to be winsome in these areas, to be proud and loud with our legacy and our new discoveries of the Bible. And thank you so much for those 12 years that you served as Director General of the Bible Societies, that big portfolio that includes Canada. And like you say, this is a cross-confessional family, meaning it's as big as as big as we can get it. Catholic, Orthodox, mainstream, what used to be mainstream, evangelical as well.
Yeah.
And so thank you so much for taking those years to lead it. And thank you for your work in peace and conflict and for challenging us on our daily reading of the Bible. Michael Perreau, this has been a great honor.
It's been a joy to connect with you, Lorna.